Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. You got your boy. I don't know why I say the things I do sometimes. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger here. And this is a very exciting red letter day for me. I've done something that I have never done in my entire life. Ever. Kind of, sort of. Mostly that I've never done in my entire life, and I'll explain in a second. I know I'm being confusing. Yesterday, what was yesterday? The 23rd? November 23rd is the first day of my life I went out and bought a brand new Mac. Yesterday I went out and I bought a brand new 2020 M1 Apple Silicon MacBook Pro, 13-inch MacBook Pro. I was back and forth between a MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, and at first I had put in the shopping cart to pick up at Micro Center the MacBook Air. But an hour later I went back and I said, you know what, it's a little bit more money, but I think I'm going to be much happier with it in the end. And this is going to be a long run type of thing. It's not like I'm going to be getting a new Mac every single year. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's the outlay of cash. I have rarely ever in my life spent more money all up at once than I have on this MacBook Pro. The most on a computer, at least. My last daily driver, which I still have right now, and I'll consider what I might want to do with that. My MSI GS43 VR with the i7 and the GTX 1060 graphics card in there. I think that was $1,400, and after all the sales tax and everything with the MacBook Pro, it's about the same. And I'm less than 24 hours into it. It is about almost 7 o'clock by the time I'm recording this podcast right now, and I've only had it for maybe 23 hours or so. And I gotta say, you know, maybe to call this podcast a review of an M1 isn't the most accurate. I guess you could call it my review of the Apple M1, having not used a Mac in a long time. So let me clarify what I said at the beginning, that this is the first time ever I bought a brand new Mac. That's true. This is the very first time I've ever gone and bought a brand new Mac. The last Mac I had that I owned was a hand-me-down. Not hand-me-down. I got it off Craigslist somewhere. It was it was an iMac from like 2008 or 9. It had a Core 2 Duo in there. It was a 32-bit operating system. I don't even know what version. Sierra? Was that right? Or was it Lion or Mountain Lion or something like that? It was an old Mac operating system. Well, an older Mac operating system than Big Sur that I'm using right now. And I didn't use that iMac very often. I just had it so that I had a Mac, and that's kind of the capacity I used it. It really wasn't good for anything. And it was I think it was a 2009 or 2008 iMac. What size was the screen? 20-inch? I forget. And by the time I got it in like 2015 or 16, whenever I had it for 5 minutes. No, was it before that? It might have been a 2006 or something. It was old. It couldn't even play YouTube videos. I couldn't even watch 720 YouTube videos. It would just chug and chug and chug. And I did open it up and I put a solid state drive in there. It was a SATA 1 or SATA 2 interface. Solid state drive. It helped boot times, helped load times, but it didn't help the machine run any smoother. But I did have the Mac, so that I was more familiar with with Mac OS, and just kind of so I just had some familiarity with Mac. Before that, I hadn't used a Mac since recording engineering school. Obviously, recording studios, 9 out of 10 recording studios use Macs, and of course, that is what I learned on. I used Pro Tools 5-point-something, 6-point-something back in 2003 when we were using a Mac, and I forget what kind of Mac it was, a G4, G5, maybe it was a G3. Single core, I think it was still single core back then. I went to sound school in 2003. So I had used Macs, and we have Macs all around the radio station here. I've used Macs. I have just never went out and bought a brand new Mac with dual purpose. So one main purpose, obviously, you don't spend this kind of money without having the express intention of using the device as a daily driver. At least I don't. This was a stretch, and I need to thank my wife right now for being so cool about this. And I made a strong case, and we're doing okay, and it made sense. And I don't buy big computers like this, but once every few years. And this Mac, I don't care with the M1 and M2 and M3 or whatever's coming down the pipe, I'm going to have this Mac for a long time. So it was quite an expenditure. So yeah, but the intention is to use it as a daily driver. So one of the things I've been doing today is putting it through its paces with software that I can use daily. So what I use to record and mix these podcasts on a Windows-based device is Cakewalk Sonar. I've mentioned that 1,000 times, that I'm certified in Pro Tools, but I prefer to use Cakewalk Sonar. The next DAW that I dabbled with the most was Reaper, because Reaper is available on the Raspberry Pi 4, whereas Pro Tools and Cakewalk Sonar and whatnot and Logic Pro is not available on Raspberry Pi, obviously. But it just kind of dawned on me today as I installed Pro Tools, and if you follow me on Twitter, I showed off how well Pro Tools runs emulated under Rosetta 2. It's mind-boggling. And so one of the concerns I have, not to get too sidetracked, is I mentioned a podcast or two ago that we don't know about compatibility with Pro Tools in the future. That if you go to Avid's own website, it says it's to be determined or no date announced for running natively on Apple M1. And I was worried that running Pro Tools through Rosetta, that maybe you could launch the actual software. Maybe you could actually launch Pro Tools, but Pro Tools relies on a whole bunch of plugins, and plugins is like software running within software. Can Rosetta handle all of that? And if you saw on my Twitter, did I say YouTube or Twitter? On my Twitter and on my Instagram, I had a fairly big project with a lot of synths going, a lot of MIDI going, and a few audio tracks going, that it was... The CPU and RAM weren't even batting an eye. Running Pro Tools under Rosetta 2 emulation. And I speculated, if it's this good emulated, taking that performance hit right off the top through emulation, how good is it going to be when it runs natively? But I decided, yes, Pro Tools, I'm coming back around to this, my beginning point here. Yes, Pro Tools runs on the Mac, obviously, and yes, Pro Tools runs on Windows, obviously, but the only DAW that I'm semi-familiar with that runs across 3 platforms, that runs on Raspberry Pi, that runs on Mac OS, and runs on Windows, is Reaper. And I really like Reaper. Reaper has been growing on me. I've been using it more intensely over the past 24 hours. I have dabbled with it in the past. DAWs are kind of all the same. It's just different ways about doing things, and Reaper is a very reasonably priced DAW. I think it's like $60 if you want to pay for it. You can evaluate it for quite a while, but when you pay for it, it's like $60. Cakewalk Sonar was $400 when I bought it. Pro Tools, at one point, I had my own copy of Pro Tools, and that was $500 when I bought it. But Reaper is so reasonably priced, and it's so intuitive. It's so good, and it's laid out so well. And I know that kind of, a layperson might open it up and it might look very intimidating. That's true. GarageBand is going to be way more approachable if you're a beginner. But if you've been using audio software for quite a while, it's kind of like video editing software. If you've been using audio software for a while, if you've been using Pro Tools, if you've been using Cakewalk, if you've been using Logic, you will have, it's slightly less of a learning curve when you jump to Reaper. But what sold me on possibly transitioning to Reaper, at least for making these podcasts, is, again, that it's available on all 3 platforms. That when I go home, I don't have to fire up that big Ryzen 9 desktop PC. I can literally just fire up the Raspberry Pi 4 or even the Raspberry Pi 3. And now on Raspberry Pi, since everything, I can work on a project like I work on the laptop, or I work on the Ryzen 9 machine in Reaper, save it to Dropbox. Everything's in Dropbox, which means I can go to any device, go to the Mac, I can go anywhere I want, and just open that project in Reaper right where I left off, either on Raspberry Pi 4, Mac OS, or Windows. that was a huge selling point to using Reaper versus anything else. Now, it's not only audio software that I've been kind of putting through its paces. I have spent a couple hours before doing this podcast trying to get up to speed with DaVinci. I'm not sure if DaVinci Resolve is on Raspberry Pi 4. Even if it was, I don't imagine it would run very well, but DaVinci is on Windows and DaVinci is on Mac. Previously, my video editing software, the video editing software that I know the most is Sony Vegas. Is it even called Sony Vegas? Who owns Vegas now? But it's Vegas Pro 15? Yeah, I think it's Vegas Pro 15. I got it on Steam. Very familiar with it. I've had a few of you listeners back several months ago. I put out kind of a poll to you guys. Email me what kind of video editor that you use. If I'm not going to use Vegas, what video editing software should I use? And a few of you said you should download Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. It's the basic version of it is free. There's so many tools included into so many plugins and so many effects that are included. And you were, of course, 100 completely right. It is, to me, and it might just be because that I'm coming from Vegas and you get so familiar with one software that you use for such a long time. DaVinci Resolve, to me, is kind of intimidating. I was like, you know what? I might challenge myself I'm going to do I'm going to do a video about the MacBook Pro 13, and I'm going to try to edit it all in DaVinci Resolve. Anyways, in my initial dabbling with DaVinci Resolve, running through Rosetta 2 on the MacBook Pro 13-inch with the M1 ARM processor, first experience is wonderful as far as how speedy it is. It has that Blackmagic speed test, which tells you basically, it does this kind of benchmark, and it tells you what kind of footage you can expect to run on the device that you run the benchmark on. And basically, 4K is cake on the M1 MacBook Pro. And again, this is under Rosetta 2 with DaVinci Resolve. How much better is it going to be running natively? I think 4K is something like 4K RAW, whatever, 60 frames a second I can do on this MacBook Pro. Now, with the M1 Silicon chip, I am never going to do that. I will likely, well, not never. I will. If I'm doing 8K, if I'm up to 8K, that means something has taken, I've had some wild success to be filming using like a Red Dragon or something in 8K and editing in 8K and then uploading to YouTube in 4K and 8K, whatever. The most I'm ever going to edit on this machine or on any machine ever is going to be 4K. And even that is rare. 99% of what I do, maybe 95% of what I do is going to be 1080p, and it's something like hundreds of frames per second. The benchmark for editing 1080p on the M1 MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air, for that matter, is hundreds of frames per second of raw 1080 footage. It's nuts. I don't think I'm going to be limited by the hardware in editing videos on the MacBook Pro, but I'm going to be very limited, at least initially, as I get up to speed with DaVinci Resolve. It is a night and day difference from Vegas. I'm so used to Vegas. But since there's no more boot camp, one of the concerns I brought up, and that many reviewers, lots of people who know Macs and PCs and everything, there's no more boot camp on the M1, at least not for now. You know my view on that. I think it's just a matter of time before we get boot camp back on the Mac, on the M1. You can still obviously do boot camp on the Intel-based MacBooks, but if you're buying a new MacBook right now, I guess it depends who you are. It really depends who you are. For me, who prior to buying this device didn't have such a huge vested, big investment in the Mac ecosystem of software, I'm just diving into this as a more or less a Mac virgin as far as my daily driver is concerned. It makes all the sense in the world right now. If you had any inkling of getting a Mac, any inkling, like you're a PC user, you're a Windows user, not because you're a fanboy or anything like that, fanboy or girl. It's just what you use. It's just what has been required. It's just all the software you use is on Windows and it's not available on Mac. And you've been waiting and you've been on the fence like I have for a few years, actually. When is the right time to jump in with a Mac and start getting used to that whole ecosystem? I submit that it's now, because I was in that boat. In the M1 it was such a paradigm shift. You know my stance on that. One of the biggest reasons I bought the Mac. It's a good segue into this. Obviously, I said you don't spend that kind of money that I spent on this MacBook Pro and just have it as some sort of novelty toy. It's something that I'm going to be putting into daily use, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, to do these podcasts, to edit videos, to do my work, to do everything on. This is going to be a daily driver. It's an investment. But the secondary reason, and I think I've mentioned this in a prior podcast, the secondary reason that I wanted to get a Mac now is precisely because of that M1. 90% of the reviews that you read or see about the M1 powered Macs are glowing. They are glowing reviews about it. And I myself have glowing reviews about it. But I also had huge concerns about it. But maybe I am in a unique position here. The second biggest reason I got the Mac M1 is specifically because it is that kind of paradigm shift in the industry. And there are things, and I'll get into this, there are things that as of right now on November 24th, 2020, that don't work flawlessly on the M1 Power Mac or don't work at all. But, and that's a big, so the other 10% of reviews that are, I won't call it knocking the Mac M1, but they bring up that reality that there are some things that if you depended on these things that they do not work on a MacBook Pro. One of the biggest ones being Boot Camp is not available currently on the M1 powered MacBooks. But I look forward to uncovering and unveiling and being on that path along with everybody else who has an M1 powered Mac of, hey, did you see the update for instance, Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve? Now it runs natively on the M1, and everyone who uses DaVinci can kind of rejoice that day and how much better it runs natively on the M1. Or same thing for Pro Tools. Those of us who use Pro Tools, hey, did you see that Pro Tools finally, Avid just released the update that runs natively on the M1? Let's all rejoice in that. It's one of the greatest things as a tinkerer and as a geek is when you struggle with something and then that thing works. And getting this Mac right now with the M1 processor means I have a long road ahead of me of possibly weekly, monthly, maybe daily in some sort of spurts of this revelation and tinker where the thing just works, where what you wanted to do with it, now it works, and it's amazing. And it's so amazing that the rest of the industry will hopefully transition to ARM with their personal computing devices, with laptops and notebooks and such. So one of those things that doesn't work, this is just an example because it's not anything that's critical to most people. It has nothing to do with your work. It's not going to put, food on your table, but it's something that is important, and it's important to me. Emulator, video game emulation. Now, I haven't put this M1 through its paces with all the emulators. For instance, I'm sure that when I get done doing this podcast and I go and I download a version of an SNES emulator for Mac, I have no disillusions that it will most likely run under Rosetta 2 just fine. That you'll be able to play an 8-bit game or 16-bit game, NES and Super NES games, even through Rosetta 2 at playable frame rates, more than playable frame rates. 60 frames a second, easy. Yoshi's Island, 60 frames a second, I have no doubt in my freaking mind. Now, the only emulator that I did try, because it's more of an applicable test, I think, more of a relevant test to the M1, is PPSSPP, Sony PSP emulation. I wanted to fire up PPSSPP and fire up God of War, Ghost of Sparta, or Chains of Olympus, because that is kind of like the benchmark for testing PSP emulation on any device or running either of the God of Wars. If you run it at a playable frame rate, you know the device is great. PPSSPP runs flawlessly on Intel-based Macs. But the roadblock I've run into is that you have to open up the terminal in Mac and plug in a code. It's kind of like open up the terminal in Raspberry Pi. There's kind of related ARM-based and Linux and all the underlying operating system kind of stuff. It's very similar. But I put that command line in there into the terminal, and it comes back with, you need to run this installation through Rosetta 2. And I don't know how to do that. This is a command line I put in through the terminal. I'm sure there's some command I can put into the terminal that would route this installer through the terminal, go through Rosetta 2, but I don't know how to do that. So that was kind of a roadblock for me, that I can't get PPSSPP running because I don't know how to run that terminal command through Rosetta 2. And it's early, and it's, what is the phrasing is it? It's something like it's not yet native to M1 chips yet. But whoever develops PPSSPP was very deliberate in that terminology. It says it's not, the phrase was something like PPSSPP is not available, parentheses, yet, for M1 powered Macs. So you know that it's coming down the line. And I will be one of those people on the ground floor here that PPSSPP is coded to run natively on ARM. That's coming in the next, man, if it takes more than a month for PPSSPP in this scenario to run natively on ARM, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if it takes more than a month, because PPSSPP runs on everything. You can download it for freaking like a Blackberries. There's ports of it for Blackberry. You can run it on anything with a screen. So the fact that it's not on M1 yet, it's just a matter of time. It's just yet. If it takes more than a month, I'd be surprised. So that's one of the instances that kind of roadblocked me. I know that if you had an Intel-powered Mac and you downloaded PPSSPP to run on Big Sur, it would be no problem, or way less of a problem, but that the M1 chip kind of prevents it at this point because it's not available. That's only one example. There are other programs. I haven't run across one yet for my daily driving programs that I need to use that has said, hey, it's not compatible. It's just flat out not compatible with this Mac, either through Rosetta 2 or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not available. I've heard that there are some software, like CAD software, not AutoCAD. I don't think AutoCAD, but there's some 3D modeling software that doesn't. One of the reviews I was reading was basically this guy just raking the M1 based Macs over the coals. And he says, if you use any of this software, then you should not buy the M1. And I agree, but the software, the average person has no idea what this software is. This is such niche professional, like professional software for like architects and things like that, yeah, if you're one of those 5 people that uses this software, I mean 5 people, just, what I'm saying, just percentage of population. If you are in this very small group of people that needs this very specific software that doesn't currently run on the M1, yeah, you shouldn't get an M1 powered Mac. But if you are most other people, whatever you need to use already runs fine through Rosetta 2, and it bewilders the mind how good it does under emulation. Now, elsewhere on the MacBook Pro, at least, I do have some kind of, not concerns, but just, it's like, why didn't you, Apple of all companies, why didn't you do this or that? For one thing, I don't know why it stuck out to me. When I plug in the charger to one of the 2 available USB Type-C Thunderbolt 3 USB 4 ports, there's only 2 ports on this Mac other than the headphone jack, which is crazy. Like, you still put the headphone jack on there, but you only have 2 Thunderbolt ports. But that's the same on the Mac Mini, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air. For some reason, it's just 2 ports right now. That's not my issue. I knew that going into it, only 2 Thunderbolt ports. I do already have a dongle because my GS43 VR Windows laptop has a Thunderbolt port 2, and it gives you more USB 3 ports and micro SD card reader and Ethernet and a pass-through for the USB Type-C to run a monitor or charger or whatever. I've got a dongle. I've dabbled in the dongle life before getting this MacBook, so I'm good there. Anyways, a lack of ports wasn't my concern. I knew that going into that, but lack of ports on Macs has been a thing for years. Remember the 2012 MacBook Pro before they went to unibody design, or I think even a few years after they went to unibody design, they had all the ports on earth. You had freaking DVI ports on the side of MacBook Pros. It was truly professional. Anything you want to hook up to, you had FireWire, USB, DVI, VGA, HDMI. All the ports on earth were on Macs. And then they just started axing them. And now we're down to, on the current 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is the latest MacBook Pro available, 2 Thunderbolt ports, USB 4 ports, 2 of them. But I've come to terms with that. I knew what I was getting into. Anyways, when I plugged in my USB charger, you heard the tone, you heard the boop or whatever it makes when you plug in the charger, and it's a hand shook with the charger and you're charging, whatever. You hear the tone come out of the speakers when the laptop is closed. But I was looking around. It's like, is there not like an LED light, near the charger or somewhere on the exterior, just like a tiny little pinhole LED light, like a white, Apple-esque light to let you know that it's plugged in and is charging? And I just thought it was weird. I was like, this thing costs so much money, and it's Apple, and everything is so polished. There can't be a light somewhere to let you know that it's plugged in. I mean, you can see that it's plugged in, but being plugged in doesn't mean that you know that it's charging or not. The other end of the cable could be unplugged. Charger should also be magnetic again. It should be MagSafe on the new MacBook Pro. I thought that might happen, but it didn't. Some other little niggles is I wish there was a touch bar option, a touch bar delete option. I appreciate the physical escape key. I have talked in the past about the touch bar and the escape key and function keys and stuff like that. There's no way to option out of the touch bar on this current model of 13-inch MacBook, M1 powered MacBook Pro. So I've got the touch bar, and it looks neat. I mean, it's pretty cool, but just because it looks neat and is cool, functionality of it is another thing. Not functionality specifically, but how much I'm going to use it. The only time that I use the touch bar is because I have to use it to adjust things like screen brightness and volume. I mean, yes, you can use the mouse or use the trackpad to go up into the control panel and adjust those things, but usually, on Windows laptops and any other laptop, and even I would assume Macs with non-touch bars, that it's a matter of touching function or command or option or controller, one of those buttons, probably function, and just tapping like F6 to increase brightness, F5 to decrease brightness. I just wish it was like that. Right now for volume, I have to be touching a screen or manipulating a screen to manipulate the volume, unless there's some shortcut that I don't know about. But that's one reason I got this Mac, is so I could learn all those things and get up to speed on all those things. There's definitely no dial or slider physically anywhere that I can do the volume. Right now, until I figure something else out, the only time I use the touch bar is to adjust the brightness of the screen and adjust the volume. There's been a couple things that I've seen kind of show up there. Like, it's like web addresses show up there when you're watching a YouTube video. It shows like the link to the YouTube video, the web address of the YouTube video. Like, why? What's the point of that? I would so much rather have the function buttons up there, the actual physical keys. And I know that a lot of software and GarageBand and other software use sliders and faders and all sorts of things that you can use the touch bar. But it's still just, it's such a novelty. I will say that the touch bar is such a novelty. I don't know when I'll be using it very much, if at all. Again, I use it because I have to do volume and brightness. The other thing, and I just kind of blanked out on it. Oh yeah, when I first started setting it up, when I first opened it up and it went boom, and it went through the regional settings. What country are you from? How are you going to use this thing? Here's what language are you going to say? That whole, just the initial setup process. The very first thing I did, and maybe this is kind of Pavlovian, but it's a clear screen. It's not a matte screen. It's I would assume some sort of Gorilla Glass screen. It's very smooth, very reflective. The first thing I did in the setup process was reach up and touch English. I just like I know that there's no such thing as a touchscreen MacBook. I know that, but my instinct seeing that glossy screen was to touch, and I just kind of laughed. I just kind of tilted my head back a little bit and chuckled. Oh yeah, there's no touchscreen on the MacBooks yet. No touchscreen on the Air, no touchscreen on the MacBook Pro. They got to sell those iPads. So while they have the iOS apps, yes, that run, some of them at least run on Big Sur. Not all of them. Some of them do. They are definitely made for touch, and some games work just fine. Some apps work just fine manipulating it with the mouse, but multi-touch kind of stuff, it would be difficult, I would imagine. But I tested, what game did I test? Field Runners. That's a game that you can just kind of use a mouse for, and it worked just fine. I really wish you could blow it up full screen. That's another thing, and maybe that's coming down the pipe, or maybe I couldn't figure out how to do it. You can zoom in and stuff, but the app, the iOS app, the iOS game, Field Runners in this case, was just a little, it looked like someone put an iPhone 4S or like an iPhone 12 mini just on your screen. That's how big the window is, and you can zoom in that window, zoom into the playing field and stuff like that, but like, why? This is already, it's kind of 16 by 9-ish. Can I just blow it up to full screen? That would be so much better. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to do that. Am I just being stupid? I might just be being stupid, but there was nothing. I tried everything, dragging the edges around, going up to the maximize thing. It says, you want to clip this to the left side of the screen, right side of the screen? You want to go full screen? You can't go full screen. I couldn't do it. Why? Maybe that's coming down the pipe. I would have imagined that a lot of these gripes that we have with the M1 Mac and Big Sur and just the combination of the two, I imagine those things are going to get rectified. Just like recoding to run natively on M1 ARM processor is going to get rectified in the near future. And it's going to be so fun to fire up the Mac and see that, oh, iOS apps can run full screen now. Oh, I can run PPSSPP natively on the M1. Oh, Reaper is now native on the M1, although the version of Reaper that I run is an M1 beta, native M1 beta, although I can't see or feel or notice it running any faster than it being emulated under Rosetta 2. That's just how good Rosetta 2 is and how good the M1 processor is. But the version of Reaper that I'm using is a beta, M1 beta build. Friggin' Reaper already put it out. So all these little things will be addressed. One day I'll wake up and fire up Pro Tools and say, hey, it's native M1 now. One day I'll wake up and fire up DaVinci Resolve. Hey, native on the M1 now. And that'll be just like, it'll feel good. The feels, man, it'll feel good. Oh, I'm over 30 minutes. We'll see if I put an ad in here. It's so close. What else can I tell you about the MacBook Air? I will let everyone know, the MacBook Pro, I will let everybody know kind of as I go what I notice about the MacBook Pro and using the M1, not only as, I'm along with everybody else using an M1 MacBook Pro for the first time, or M1 Mac for the first time, but as a relative Mac noob who uses PC 99.9% of the other time, it's his very first time buying a brand new Mac. I'll have that perspective too. There are things just even around the operating system that I haven't, like the keystrokes I haven't figured out yet. There's no easy way. I don't know. It's just a different way to browse around the file manager. It's just different. There's just a lot of things that are different and things that I'm noticing that surely this command has to be there. There's a way to do this thing, but it's just different than Windows, and I'm going to have to kind of get up to speed on all that stuff, and I'm noticing all that stuff and learning all that stuff, and it's going to be fun to kind of relay that to you. So as we wrap up the podcast here, I'm going to end with one of my famous audio bombshells. Oh my goodness, what was this recorded on today, Johnny? Was this on cassette tape? Was this on a VHS tape? What the heck are you doing? The audio bombshell today is that this entire podcast was recorded onto the built-in microphones of the MacBook Pro. I've been leaning down, for those of you who want to know where the main microphone is in the MacBook Pro, because there's like 3 or 4 microphones. There's an array of microphones. It's beamforming, whatever, makes Skype calls sound good, Zoom calls sound good. But the main microphone, they tout this as being a studio grade microphone, which I just mean this probably means it's on par with a decent USB condenser microphone. But that microphone, the main one, is under the left speaker grill. So I've been sitting this entire time with my mouth about 4 or 5 inches from the left speaker grill, and this entire thing was recorded on the built-in quote unquote studio grade microphones of the MacBook Pro itself. I recorded it directly into Reaper. I got all my bump music and everything, and if I wouldn't have told you, would you have known? You would have known that there was a change in audio quality. This does not sound like the broadcast Electro Voice RE27 and $5,000 signal chain that I normally speak into. This is just the built-in microphone to the MacBook Pro, and that is one reason that I went with the MacBook Pro. The idea that I can just toss this in my backpack, toss this in a briefcase or whatever, and have a very serviceable microphone built right into the laptop, meaning I don't have to carry around extra microphones. That was a huge reason why I went with the MacBook Pro. That and the speakers are astounding. They sound so good, and audio is so important for me, and I wanted a good all-in-one audio production device, and a MacBook Pro definitely fits that bill. So let me know what you think. Are you surprised that you're listening to the built-in microphone of the MacBook Pro 13-inch right now? Does it sound good to you? I've done minimal processing, so as far as EQ, I've boosted the low end very slightly. Like I've boosted around 100 hertz by like 1.5 dB. And then similarly, to add a little bit more air to it, I went up to around 12,000 hertz, a little curve up around 12,000 hertz, and then added another 1.5 decibels to that as well. Then I put it through my normal kind of compression ratio, which is a ratio of 4:1, 2 dB knee. I set the threshold so that, on average, it kind of pulls it down to about -6 as I speak, and then the release time is at 124 milliseconds. Attack time is 1 millisecond. Almost the exact same settings that I use in Cakewalk Sonar. I even have the mastering plugin going here on Reaper. I use Isotope Ozone for the mastering on the final render. So you are listening to a very lightly processed, built-in MacBook Pro 13-inch M1 studio grade, quote unquote, microphone. I think I'll dial it in a little bit better. If it sounds, I don't know, it's going to sound perfectly fine. I mean, there's podcasts, let's be honest, that you listen to that don't sound as good as this one sonically. They might be better podcasts than mine, but the sonic quality is like, dude, are you sitting way across the room? What kind of potato are you talking into? So the audio quality should be good, and that is just 100% built into the MacBook Pro. I've also mixed this using just the MacBook Pro speakers, so I have to adjust my ears to that. So if I record another podcast on the MacBook Pro, which I definitely will, I'm going to record dozens more podcasts, hundreds of more podcasts probably, using the MacBook Pro and mixing it only with the speakers. It'll get dialed in. That's the most important thing about audio monitors, audio speakers, is, what speakers are better than the other speakers? Should I buy these KRKs? Should I buy these M Audio? Should I buy these Atoms? Should I buy these Tannoys? Whatever. The most important thing is that you learn the speaker. They're all very good audio monitors, but the most important thing is that you learn it, that you learn how to mix on it, that you mix on it, then bring it out to the car, bring it to a boombox, play it through your home theater system, whatever, and that way you know that when you hear a certain frequency happening on these speakers, for instance, the MacBook Pro speakers, if I hear it sounds like this, then I know I need to adjust it like that to sound good in the car, or to sound good on headphones, or whatever. So I'll get all that dialed in, but not too shabby, is it? You are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love, and you are worthy of receiving love. You are also worthy of your own self-respect. Please know that. If you don't remember anything else on these podcasts, know that you are worthy of love and your own self-respect. Thank you so much for indulging me in talking about my initial thoughts on the M1 powered MacBook Pro 13-inch. I love all of y'all. If I don't talk to you until after Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, all my American listeners, happy Thanksgiving. Let's be good to each other all over the world. Let's make that our New Year's resolution, to be good to each other, to know we are loved and know we are worthy of our own self-respect. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.